What's up, Tumnad lectures? In this video, we are looking at what we call the components of the cardiovascular system. If you find it helpful at the end of it, please, you guys know what to do. You hit like button, comment down in the comment section, and please subscribe. Let's go ahead and get started. In the previous videos, we have been looking at what we call the basic concept in the introduction of what we call the cardiovascular system. In this video, we are going to be mainly focusing on what we call the components of the cardiovascular system. We shall go ahead and see what we call the functions played by what we call the cardiovascular system. Let's go ahead and get started. When we talk about the components of the cardiovascular system, these are going to be the different parts, the different structures that really work hand in hand and they make what we call the cardiovascular system. The first one, which is super very important, is what we call the heart. Okay, the heart is one of the first component of the cardiovascular system, which is going to be responsible for pumping what we call the blood. Okay, and then the second kind of the component of the cardiovascular system is going to be what we call the blood vessels. Okay, and of course the blood vessels, they are going to be the tube-like structure, the interconnected network of different kind of the vessels through which our kind of the blood is going to be circulating. We have a couple of different kind of the blood vessels. We have what we call the arteries. We have what we call the veins, and even also have what we call the capillaries. Okay, and even what we call the capillaries. Okay, so now these are the three main types of what we call the blood vessels. Super very important. We shall go into the detail of each one of them individually in great detail. Okay, the third component of the cardiovascular system is what we call the blood, which is a fluid connective tissue which is going to be moving inside these tubes we are calling the blood vessels. Okay, so now the third component is going to be what we call the blood. Okay, so now these are the three main components of the cardiovascular system. However, we also have another kind of the structure that ensures unidirectional of blood flow. If this structure is absent, the cardiovascular system cannot work efficiently. For that reason, we also need to recognize this component as also part of the cardiovascular system. You know how these structures are called? These structures are what we call the valves. Okay, these structures here are what we call the valves. Super very important. They are going to be residing in the heart and even also in what we call the veins. They ensure unidirectional of blood flow. Such a beautiful thing. Okay, so now all of these components, they make a lot of sense. Okay, now having looked at the components of the cardiovascular system, let's go ahead and see what are those functions played by the cardiovascular system. Okay, now the first function of the cardiovascular system is going to be what we call transport of what we call the different types of the nutrients to the tissues that need them most. Okay, so now the first function is going to be transport of what we call transport of nutrients. Okay, transport of nutrients. And when we talk of the nutrients, we are going to be seeing a lot of nutrients. For example, you're going to be having what we call the glucose. You're going to be having what we call the amino acids. Okay, and even also going to be having what we call the fatty acids, and even also other different kind of the minerals which are going to be utilized by what we call the tissues. Okay, now that's going to be one of the main functions of the cardiovascular system. Now the question is, where are the nutrients going to be coming from? And of course, when you take into the digestive system, we shall have most of the nutrients get absorbed in the small intestine into the circulatory system. Okay, by doing that, those nutrients will be driven to the tissues where they are going to be utilized. Okay, the second function of the cardiovascular system is going to be what we call transport of what we call oxygen gas. Okay, what we call transport of oxygen to tissues. Okay, so now the question is, where is this oxygen going to be coming from? And of course, we have what we call the lungs. The lungs, they have what we call exchange surfaces through which our oxygen is going to be entering into the blood as we pass out what we call the carbon dioxide. Okay, and that one makes a lot of sense. So cardiovascular system helps in the transport of oxygen gases into what we call to the tissues for different kind of the cellular respiration. Okay, it's all that simple. Okay, so now the third function of the cardiovascular system is that if we have given the tissues, we have given them the required nutrients, we have given them the oxygen gas. Now, the tissues are going to do what we call a lot of different metabolic processes. And some of the byproducts of the metabolic processes, which we are calling the waste, they have to be eliminated off to ensure homeostasis of what we call the internal environment. However, if these wastes are not eliminated, we shall not have the normal continuity of the functioning of the human body. Okay, for that reason, it is the work of the cardiovascular system through the use of what we call the flow of blood in blood vessels to keep collecting all the waste to the site where they're going to be deposited, and then finally they're going to be pooped out into the environment. Okay, for that reason, we are going to be seeing the cardiovascular system helping in transport, what we call transport of metabolic wastes. Okay, wastes to the sites of elimination. Okay, like for example, carbon dioxide is going to be transported what we call to the lungs, where we are going to be breathing it out in exchange for oxygen. Then we also have how what we call the waste products like the urea to pass through the kidneys, and then they move out as part of the urine. Okay. So now another kind of the function of the cardiovascular system is going to be now, let's first pretend that I have a serious infection, or even I have gotten a skin tear on my hand. Now, what happened is that the cardiovascular system is going to be helping in driving all the required kind of the immune cells to reach the site of the infection, and they start the process of what we call killing the bacteria or the viruses that have injured me in this area. Besides that, if this area is bleeding, we shall also have through the cardiovascular system, it will drive what we call the clotting factors that will come and make a very firm clot here such that there is no more out movement of the blood. Besides that, there's no more entry of what we call microbes for the environment. For that reason, cardiovascular system is helping in transport of immune cells, antibodies, and even also the clotting factors from different parts of the body, for example, from the liver. Okay, the first function of cardiovascular is transport, is what we call transport of immune cells. And when we talk of the immune cells, these are going to be the different types of the white blood cells. Okay, and even also what we call antibodies, and even also what we call clotting factors. Okay, all these ones are going to be working in hand to make sure that immunity is going to be ensured. Okay, it is such another beautiful thing. So now that's also going to be a function of the cardiovascular system. Another function is that through the cardiovascular system, we are going to be moving different kind of the molecules from the site where they're going to be produced to that area where they're going to be working most. What I'm trying to mean, the pancreas produces a specific type of the molecule which moves through the blood, and it goes and it causes glucose uptake into what we call the cells. For that reason, cardiovascular system is going to be helping us in transport of what we call hormones. Okay, it's going to be what we call a transport of hormones. Okay, transport of hormones. For example, there are very many kinds of the hormones. We have what we call the insulin. We have what we call the glucagon. There are very many types of the hormones which have to be transported through the blood to the site where they're going to be causing a different physiological process. Okay, so now all that one makes a lot of sense. Number 6 is going to be what we call temperature regulation. Okay, it's going to be what we call temperature regulation, but a beautiful term to use is what we call thermal regulation. Okay, it's going to be what we call thermal regulation. Okay, thermal regulation. So now, what does this one mean? Now, let's first pretend for a minute that the situation is too cold. The environment is too cold. When the environment is too cold, you realize that the blood vessels which are on the skin, they are going to constrict and they disappear away. What is the significance of this? Now, blood as it is moving, it is always carrying a lot of heat. Now, because the environment is cold, we don't need more blood to come to the skin, which will lead into the loss of heat to the environment. We are struggling with the temperature, and then we don't need to bring the blood to the skin surface to lose what we call the heat. Okay, and then in the other way around, when the temperature of the environment becomes a bit high, these blood vessels are going to dilate such that they bring more blood to the skin, which will allow more heat to be lost to the environment. All that one is aiming at regulating the body temperature. All that one makes a lot of sense. Okay, it's also such another beautiful thing. Now you can even call thermoregulation as body temperature, as body temperature, as body temperature regulation. Okay, as body temperature regulation. That is now another simplest way you can call this kind of thermoregulation. Okay. And then the last one that is super very important is going to be what we call maintenance of the blood pressure. Okay, it's going to be what we call maintenance of blood pressure. Okay. The question is, how does the cardiovascular system help in maintenance of the blood pressure? It's all that simple. Now, let's first pretend for a minute that you have had a lot of what you call the running motions of what you call the diarrhea or the road traffic accident. You have lost a lot of the blood, or you have lost a lot of the fluids. Now, when you lose a lot of the fluids, the bigger percentage of blood is water. All that one, everyone knows that. Now, what happens is that if you lose a lot of the water, you are going to be reducing the volume of blood. Now, if you reduce the volume of blood, you are reducing what we call venous return. The blood is going back to the heart. When you reduce the venous return, you're going to be reducing what you call the ejection fraction, which we are calling the stroke volume. Okay, you're going to be reducing what we call the stroke volume. Now, once you reduce the stroke volume, you are now going to be reducing the cardiac output. And once the cardiac output reduces, automatically it's going to be reducing what we call the blood pressure. Now, what happens is that the cardiovascular system, in conjunction with what we call the nervous system, it will make sure that heart rate increases. And once you increase the heart rate, you're increasing what we call the cardiac output. When you increase the cardiac output, you're also increasing what you call the blood pressure. So now by doing all that, we are making sure that we are maintaining what we call the blood pressure. It is such another beautiful thing to know, okay? So now, Tumnad, I have talked a lot of things. If you think whatever I've talked is making sense, is adding to you, you are enjoying, you guys know what to do. You hit like button, comment down in the comment section, and please subscribe. So now, in the next video, we are now going to be focusing on what we call the details of what we call the components of the cardiovascular system. We shall start over with what we call the human heart. We look at what we call the blood vessels, and then also what we call the blood, and then the valves in great detail. Tumunat, as always, until we meet next time.